All right, how's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're going to talk about how to build a thesis statement.
We will build it with you. So
Right.
this is Miss McCorkle and
This is Mr. Crayer, so let's get started so you don't have to watch a really long video.
okay, so the purpose behind a thesis is to make sure that you have a sentence which provides structure for your entire essay. It shapes your topic sentences and it shapes all your support. In other words, it's the central idea of your essay. It is the sun in your solar system.
Definitely, and I think a lot of teachers, if they were just to look at your thesis statement, can tell a lot about the level of your thinking on that subject because it is the most important sentence. So if your thesis statement is poorly put together or you kind of rush through it to try and get to the body paragraphs, then the rest of your essay is going to suffer.
You cannot write an essay without a thesis statement.
No, you
all
really...
essays have to have a thesis statement.
Yeah.
And it should be in your introduction, and typically it should be the last sentence in your introduction.
Mm-hmm. And so here we have a little fake mock-up of an introductory paragraph, usually consisting of a hook to get your reader in. You present your subject, whatever the topic is going to be, your book, and then finally you end and make it very specific by giving your thesis statement.
There are innumerable thesis statements that are acceptable to have, so they really are part of who you are. It's your ideas there, okay?
Mm-hmm. All right, and then your thesis statement will end up shaping your topic sentences, and then your topic sentences help put together your claim, evidence, and warrants you use to back that up.
Okay, so a thesis statement, if we define it, is really a sentence that makes an assertion about a topic and predicts how the topic will be developed, okay? So really when we look at its structure, it should have three parts: a topic, an opinion on that topic, which a lot of times comes from you.
Yeah, it's definitely your opinion, not just repeating back what other people have said.
And then a why or a how that opinion is important in the greater schemes of things in society and humanity. So if you're looking at an analytical essay where you're looking at a theme, your topic would be your theme topic. So if we're talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, maybe we're looking at discrimination or inequality there.
Prejudice, yeah.
Yes. And then you're going to have an opinion or an assertion on that and a why or how that assertion is important.
And usually people are pretty good about getting this topic.
Definitely.
Sometimes we struggle a little bit with opinions. Sometimes we just want to say what the author says or what's being said in class. But the main problem that a lot of people have with defaults is they're missing this why or how because it's a little bit hard to understand.
We do not want your thesis statement to be a fact. It should not be something that is factual. In other words, if we're looking at the statement and you are just stating, Mr. Crayer is male, this is not a thesis statement.
Let's hope that's a fact.
So you want it definitely to be something you have to prove. It should be argumentative, which is that opinion part of it.
Exactly. And if it's something obvious, then once again, it's going to be hard to back up something obvious as well. So if you're going to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird, and you're going to talk about the topic of prejudice, and then your opinion is prejudice is bad, and then why is it bad? Because it hurts people. That's going to be a really bland, vanilla essay that's not going to get very far. So the best thesis is always going to be somewhat debatable and insightful about the text or whatever you're looking at. We have a few examples up here.
For lots of different types of essays. The first example you'll see about teen suicide would be one that you could use for an argumentative or research paper. So you see the topic, which is teen suicide, and then the opinion, more preventative measures should be taken in order to save lives. But why? If you ask yourself that, well, or how in this case, by identifying and seeking professional treatment. So you're encouraging your audience to, consider helping teens who are struggling, by being preventative and by seeking out treatment. This gives us a really clear vision of what's going to happen in your paper, and it leaves us as readers wondering, well, how are they going to support that? What kind of treatment are we going to be looking at here? That's good.
Definitely. And a lot of people would agree with this. As teen suicide grows, more preventative measurements should be taken in order to save lives. If she had stopped there, that would have been a very obvious kind of factual statement. I guess some people could disagree with it, but we really get to see her opinion where she explains, well, how should we use preventative measures? And then she says it's more about identifying and seeking professional treatment. Whereas somebody might agree or disagree with this and say that there's better ways to prevent teen suicide.
Yeah, you could look at, I guess, teens training other teens to see the signs of teen suicide and perhaps report those. So there are lots of different ways you could go with that. The second example is an example for literary analysis.
Yeah, it's a pretty cut and dry thesis statement. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee shows that justice is our topic. Will never prevail if prejudice continues to infect people. Not much to say there. I think it's just a standard topic, opinion plus why or how.
I really like also how the author includes the title of the work and the author's name. This is also kind of standard, especially in literary analysis thesis statements.
Yeah. You have to imagine, too, if your audience is beyond just the teacher, if you were to pick up an essay randomly, maybe in the hallways, no one's going to know what you're talking about unless at some point you say the title and the author. And this is that presentation of subject that we talked about a little bit in that previous slide.
The third example is a little non-traditional. You'll notice that there's nothing highlighted in green. We're missing a why or a how. So we have a clear topic, the struggles of two protagonists, or three, I guess, in this, yes. And then what they're saying about it, illustrate that acceptance of the uncontrollable is unnecessary and that meaning comes not from the things of the world, but rather from within.
Okay, and you'll see that the topic is the struggles of the protagonists, and then they go ahead and they list the authors of the three, the novels, and then you'll see that the opinion, when you just kind of zoom out a little bit, there's a lot of blue there. And so they have to prove, number one, that they illustrate that acceptance is uncontrollable and necessary. And then number two, meaning comes not from things of the world, but rather from within.
This is a really meaningful and insightful idea. Sometimes teachers will be okay with you not including a why or a how, but you should never go rogue and decide not to include it without talking to your teacher first. In fact, I highly encourage that you have your teacher look at your thesis statement before you start writing your essay, because as Mr. Carrera said earlier in this, if you have a weak thesis statement, you're probably going to have a weak paper. And so you definitely want to get your teacher's approval before you move forward so that you don't have to redo the whole thing.
And I would say always try and go for the why, how if possible.
Yes.
And then if you see, though, with this third one, the sentence would almost become unwieldy with a third part. And so that, especially like Ms. McCorkle said, make sure you check with your teacher. And even if the teacher doesn't say anything about checking thesis statements, I would still shoot an email or just ask in general and see if they can help out.
Come see Mr. Carrera, he'll answer it for you.
Or Ms. McCorkle.
Okay, so some tips and then some pitfalls that sometimes we have. First of all, a lot of students will start essays or start early in high school by announcing what their paper will be about. Don't do this.
Yeah, it's awful. Just stop.
Okay, so if you're saying, in this paper I will talk about, or in this paper I will prove, just take that out.
Yeah.
We want to start with the statement, bacon is a superfood, and then, because we've got, our topic, bacon, and we've got our opinion, it's a superfood, we need our why and how then, okay? So just cut out that first part of it and start adding those parts in that we talked about before.
Definitely. And then also going along with that, sometimes you can be too broad and you're just talking about maybe a topic that appears in a novel. And it's too encompassing that you can't tackle such a huge issue in only a standard 3 or 4 or 5 pages. So The Count of Monte Cristo is a book about revenge. Well, duh.
It's kind of a fact again, too.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
It's going to be really hard to prove effectively. Sometimes it can be too specific, though, also. In The Count of Monte Cristo, Edmond Dante lost his love because of Dangler's letter. This is kind of a summary of what's happening. We do not want summaries for our thesis statement either. We once again want a topic, your opinion on the topic, and a why and how. So you really want to go back to those 3 parts and ask yourself, do I have those? So that you know that you're not summarizing, that you're not just announcing something, or that you're not presenting a fact about the book.
And something you'll see too in a lot of these examples, especially in the good ones, they usually do have the title of the book. And something that I've seen recently is just some students not tying their thesis back to the book. And usually if you have an analytic essay, you want to make sure that the thesis statement focuses on that development of that topic and your opinion within that novel, instead of just kind of adding it as a side addendum at the very end.
For literary analysis, it should really be more about the book and less about your reaction to it.
Definitely. And remember, we're pretty much done here, but there are more resources on this webpage, hopefully, that will help you out. And this is just a basic general overview of a thesis statement.
If you need more, you can always contact us, and we would be glad to make more of these to help you as you progress in the future. But we're excited to see the work that you'll produce after watching this. So
Yeah, and Miss McCorkle is very helpful.
Oh,
So
yeah.
go to her first. Nope, nope.